Hello guys. Alright, so today we are gonna continue World War One. Alright, so first of all we will do something that's not really related to World War One, which is just expansion of this tribe country. But it manages to fully connect up all of its little tribe codes, but still probably like the third weakest country in the entire world. We see it will expand to border Korea, and the Koreans will ask why they're trying to intentionally border them, but the tribe country will just not answer. And then Korea's like, okay, I guess we could still easily beat them. As for here, yeah, nothing really changes, but we see more invasion of Persia by the Turkish before they separate Persia in two, but it doesn't really matter because they can just go through India. Although we see this rebellion in the Oman country uniting with two other rebellions before they manage to sneak past just as normal trade vessels, and then they do a tiny invasion, and then India is just like, okay, and then India just like kicks them off. So, and then Turkey is like, yo bro, you did good, you still probably killed a few. But over here we see a counter offensive by the Caspian Island country as they capture more major cities, but up north they manage to reach this lake before taking its full surroundings, but the Turkish end up realizing this, that they might get what is it called, cut off and encircled, so they end up just invading this country so that they don't get encircled. But up here we see that this country will manage to push further into what was once Kazakhstan country. So we see that Kazakhstan, or Western Kazakhstan, isn't really having a fun time. But where we see now Turkey will try to do a landing here, but they are repelled, so they end up doing a landing over here, which they are successful. They managed to wrap around against the sea before doing a counter. Up here we don't see anything, but here, yeah, Russia wasn't gonna stay here. We see an invasion by the Swedish country, and then, or Norway and Sweden, I guess. Also, I forgot the color in those islands, but who really cares? Who's gonna notice? Although we see that the blue team is mobilizing its forces. So the blue team is now the third weakest country, followed, and then the second weakest country is this country, and then the weakest country of all, Pink Oman. Over here we see Kenyan forces will begin to unliberate here as they push in on all sides, capturing most of the major cities before they push up here. And then forces from whatever this country is right here, they will realize that they need to do anything, and then Kenyan forces forces will push into here and unliberate all of that before they just fully unliberate the green team. Yep, the green team, or at least the south part of the green team. Until we see the southern part surrendering. And then we see that Kenya will fully push these guys out here. And Kenya will start pushing into here. Before more invasions of the what? But we see that they will do more invasions up here. No, not that. This. Now we see every remnant of that blue team. And now Iberian forces are being massacred. But they are stopped at this Union border, but then Kenya ends up making a deal. But Kenya will end up helping this member of the Iberian Union rebel against the Iberian Union, which may start a slow collapse of the Iberian Union. But we see no more of that, as we're gonna see Libya continuing to be obliterated, as the Kenyans will end up reaching the Mediterranean Sea. Now Egypt's like, oh man, we're so cooked. Famous last words. But Turkish forces will move in and start helping the Egyptians hold out against the Iberian Union. And now the Iberian Union is starting to slowly become unstable. But we see that the Iberian Union will manage to continue pushing into the Turkish. Over here, yeah, we don't really see much. While here we see the red team will actually do a counteroffensive, kicking the Chinese a bit back, and even pushing into this occupation zone. But up here, we see that the red team will finally break a stalemate that was here, kicking the Indians out of North America. Over here, we see the Iberian Union will slightly expand to get more resources. While over here, yeah, nothing happens. You really thought that Greece was gonna rebel, huh? But we see Turkish forces will end up doing a counteroffensive or offensive over here, meeting up here. As now the Caspian Island country is just cooked. As this part of their country ends up surrendering, and now the Turkish may end up doing multiple landings, and yeah, the Caspian Island country's king will surrender. Seeing this, the Turkish forces are more free up here, so they managed to take the northern part of Persia, while over, if I can select the right color, we see Turkish forces end up blitzing through here before full focusing on this brown country. But in a shocking turn of events, this giant horde of just barbarians will just blitz through and occupy the rest of the brown team. But they're not in a war with what is it called, Korea. They only declared war on, or just, I don't know what they did. They just like went in and then just killed everyone. Down here we see that India will end up expanding slightly for more resources. Before Bangladesh will end up doing the same thing, making a weird panhandle thing. While over here we see that this country seems pretty cooked, as Kenyan forces are continuing to push. But in a major turn of events, we see the Iberian Union completely dissolving into multiple states, and the rest of the Iberian Union, which was not divided between any members, ends up having a civil war. The Iberian Union will start losing this civil war as it collapses in the Caribbean, and then the American parts end up completely losing. And now this part will just end up leaving the war. But it's extremely unstable, so what we see happening is members of the war that were on the side of the Iberian Union begin invading this nation. As they don't want their own American colonies to start to rebel. So they end up invading this nation to probably just liberate it, as it's extremely unstable and it's probably an anarchy. After the jumping of that, we see most of these members end up joining the war against Kenya, but this part of the Union will end up joining the war on Kenya's side. And it begins invading into Naples as it completely occupies this area.
What?
But we end up seeing a counter-offensive by Naples being completely successful. But then at about 11:43 p.m. on January 8th, about 1463. No, wait, that's too early. I think about 1426, 11 p.m. in the capital of Kenya. One of Kenya's lead advisors will end up sneaking into the capital, grabbing the war plans which have been aiding Kenya this entire time, and they end up running outside before Kenyan forces realize and start chasing. This guy ends up fleeing all the way up here, making it to this city where there's a fire currently, which may or may not be this person's fault. They end up burning the war plans before Kenyan forces catch them and end up killing them. But now without this, we end up seeing that Kenya will finally start losing the war. As without these war plans, Kenya just isn't able to do anything. Now Kenya ends up being pushed back on all fronts. Now Kenya just doesn't know what to do, as even the Egyptians who were once collapsing end up pushing into Kenya, or at least pushing into this part of Kenya, as Turkish forces will be able to fully kick out Kenya. But Turkish forces are forced to allow this country independence. We won't be giving them a capital so far, but after Turkish forces end up taking Kenya out, they begin an first invasion into Ethiopia. Before the first loss of land is caused, and Turkish forces outside the capital of Kenya will finally be pushed back nearly to the border, but Kenya is definitely going to survive, as Kenya needed these war plans, but without them, Kenya is just gonna be destroyed, as Libya is completely liberated, and this blue country began to be liberated. Forces from Libya will re-enter into the green team as they push down into the green team, completely encapsulating the green team, forcing it into a somewhat surrender. Forces from this maroon country will kick out Kenya before pushing all across here, liberating their ally, meeting up with their own allies' forces. I forgot who occupied this. I don't even know if the country existed there. That might have just been the green team. So, forces from this kind of rebellion will end up kicking out the Kenyans, trying to switch sides, but no one's letting that slide, as these guys will just blitz through. But most countries don't think that the Iberian Union can come back, as the entire thing just split apart. But now Kenya is starting to see that they aren't really winning. The pink country that was once here is now liberated from Kenyan forces, before all sides will end up beginning to push further into Kenya. Before the red team's colony is liberated completely. One of the members that is considered to be the leader of the Iberian Union, which is Catalonia, will end up doing a landing throughout all of South Africa, fully retaking it before pushing into Kenya. They will blitz through before the Turkish Union will do a landing, retaking their colony in, I forgot the name of this place, but they end up pushing up. Wait, I already have an invasion color for the Turks. But they end up pushing up into here, capturing a major city, before they do a landing, taking all of Madagascar. Before several more landings end up taking all the colony. Turkish forces push into here, and the Kenyan leader, seeing that Kenya is now collapsing, will end up fleeing to this major city, thinking that they are safe. But Egyptian forces will end up arriving, and it's not looking so good for Kenya. Over here we see Persia finally falling to Turkish forces before invasion of India is guaranteed. But then a rebellion starts in southern India, pushing up before the Bangladesh people will end up switching sides and trying to invade into India, but Turkish forces again aren't going to let that slide. Ah! What was that? But we see Turkish forces continue going, and likely it's just these guys doing all the work now, as Turkish forces are laid to exhaustion after occupying all this. We see that these guys will end up pushing into Bangladesh, but now that they've declared war on China, Chinese forces that are still fighting in Vietnam will end up pushing into here, but China ends up mostly focusing on the rebellion that started over here, which it's quickly gaining traction across the entire country before these guys end up joining the war, pushing into China before taking the capital, which likely wasn't occupied. We see most countries surrendering over here, and up here we see that these guys surrender, and I kind of forgot to unpause, so you can imagine whatever happened. We see that most Indian officials are in this island. But yeah, now we see, yeah. But now we see the red team ends up collapsing before the blue team finally starts an invasion of the red team, fully occupying it before focusing on. Now the blue team ends up occupying all of this land before really focusing on France, which the reason the blue team is so successful is because they're just recruiting so much people into their military. Because they just go city from city like, hey, you don't like your government, we'll join our military. So yeah, we end up seeing that France is completely divided. So France is completely divided before the blue team just pieces out, and yeah. Over here we see the militaries of China and the red team completely rebelling in the Americas, declaring like semi-independence, I guess. Well, over here, this is where all the red team leaders and stuff end up fleeing. But we end up seeing that New Zealand will end up going in and occupying this colony. Indian people will finally end up surrendering to Turkish forces. And now, yeah. No, as most of Kenya's allies have just completely collapsed, with the Turkish Union being the only super strong country left. We see Turkish forces will just be, everything is under Turkish occupation, so we see Turkish forces end up moving from all of these countries And now Kenya will finally begin to collapse.
No.
As the Kenyan leader ended up leaving this city, going all the way back to the capital thinking he was safe, but now Kenya's just collapsing before the capital is finally taken. And yeah, I don't think there's any countries with a Red Cross left, except for this country, who will now be getting obliterated from all sides. And now we can probably see a peace treaty being signed between all of these countries, but the military of China ends up making a deal and ends up betraying Kenya, finally moving in and occupying their colony over here. And now Kenya has officially been destroyed. And now we will see a peace treaty, which will likely not be very good for anyone involved besides the Turkish Union. So this is the peace treaty. It's pretty large. So here's the European compared to the occupation. Here's Asia compared to the occupation, which I forgot to split the Korean Union. Wait a minute. I'm not really sure what just happened there, but yeah, this is a pretty harsh treaty on everyone. But as we see, the Turkish Union is actually the most dominant country in the world. But you're probably wondering what the red team is doing in America. First, we need to give Atlantis independence. So here's Atlantis independence. But now, the blue team will be inheriting the entire red team's colonies. As now the red team's allies have kind of abandoned it. But we see that the Iberian Union just cannot keep hold of their colonies, or explorers just rebelling in Caribbean. So they end up letting the blue team have that land, and therefore that problem. We see the blue team being able to take the Pacifica thing. As for here, you will see division of this. We see two new countries being formed. Over here we see, yeah, this is gonna be rather interesting as there's no more colonies on this continent, but this island is colonized. No colonies. Kenya's division. Over here we see that China has no more colonies, as China was rather harshly punished. We see New Zealand gaining this land, but yeah, the Turkish Union might not survive much longer as it is becoming rapidly unstable and hyperinflation is just plaguing the Turkish Union now. But now we will finally see an update on the power ranking. So yeah, most of these countries don't even exist. Yeah, remember when Doggerland was actually in Doggerland? Crazy. Alright, we will now do the top 11. So in number 1 we see Turkey. We see the Iberian Union. Number 4 we see Ethiopia. In number 5 we see the blue team. In number 6 we see South Korea. In number 7 we see Atlantis. In number 8 we see the maroon team. In number 9 we see Indonesia. In number 10 we will see Naples. In number 11 we see Egypt. But if this also counted stability, then Libya would actually be stronger than Turkey in stability. So, yeah. That will be the end of today's video. We will see you next time on episode 15. And yeah.